The anonymous author of the book of Matthew misquotes the holy prophets of Israel countless times. Here are the first two, out of many. Matthew 2, verse 15 quotes the prophet Hosea to convince you that the prophet was referring to Jesus when God said, "Out of Egypt I called my son." He doesn't even quote the full verse, because then the reader would begin to ask questions. The full verse in Hosea 11, verse 1 reads, "When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son." Yes, Israel. Remember when God called them out of Egypt, from the house of bondage? It's clearly referring to Israel. The corrupt author had to leave out the beginning of the verse, and he also abandons the second verse in Hosea, which reads, Hosea 1 verse 2, "The more they were called, the more they went away. They kept sacrificing to the Baals and burning offerings to idols." Israel, who was called from Egypt, were called even more, but they kept sacrificing to Baal and burning offerings to idols. If you want to ignore Hosea and still say this is referring to Jesus, then your man God was also sacrificing to Baal and burning offerings to idols. Here is the second misquote. There are just too many to add to one video. The anonymous author then continues and quotes from the prophet Jeremiah. Have you heard the story from the Greek Testament, where King Herod hears of the newborn Jesus and orders his men to slaughter all male infants in Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under in order to kill Jesus? Well, as a result of the dead infants caused by the birth of Jesus, the author of Matthew tries to convince you that it was prophesied by Jeremiah. He quotes Jeremiah 31, verse 15, "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted, because they are no more." Again, ripped entirely out of context. In context of Jeremiah, the children of Israel, meaning the descendants of Israel, the nation, are in captivity after they were exiled from their land by the king of Babylon. The next verse goes on to say, "Thus said the Lord, restrain your voice from weeping, your eyes from shedding tears. For there is a reward for your labor, declares the Lord. They shall return from the enemy's land. And there is hope for your future, declares the Lord. Your children shall return to their country." If you want to believe Jeremiah is referring to dead infants returning to their land 700 years later, then I don't know what else to say. The children of Israel returning to their land is nothing new in the Hebrew Bible. This is not only a theme found in Jeremiah, it's consistent throughout the entire Hebrew Bible. All of the prophets have the same message, and when Israel is restored to its former glory, there will be a king back on the throne, and all the children of Israel will be back in their land. Every single prophecy of the Messianic age, when everybody will know the one true God, when there will be no wars, when the temple is rebuilt, when 10 men from every nation will grab the shirt of a Jew and say, "Let us go with you, for we have heard God is with you," not one has been fulfilled. Actually, the complete opposite happened since the time of Jesus. Then Christianity has to invent his second coming, since he failed the first time. It's exactly what a false religion would say. Then anybody could be the Messiah. Not once does the Hebrew scriptures say Messiah when referring to the future king. The focus is not even on the king, also known as the prince or servant David. The focus is on what the world will look like. Not only will kingship through Judah be restored, so too will the Levitical priesthood and the temple in Jerusalem, as described in great detail in the last chapters of Ezekiel. It will be just like before, except this time the whole world will be serving God and Him alone. The covenant is re-established in the sight of the world, and this time God's everlasting covenant that He remained faithful to will be in all of our hearts, just as God first intended. See Deuteronomy 6 verse 6. This doesn't mean we will no longer sin. It means there will no longer be idolatry. We are human and will still make mistakes. But even the most righteous make mistakes. It doesn't mean we are deliberately turning our backs on God's covenant. It just means we violated it. The real Messiah will even provide a bull as a sin offering to God on behalf of his own sins and the people. See Ezekiel 45 verse 22. If you are familiar with the Hebrew scriptures, specifically the Torah, you should know that the sacrificial system is for unintentional sins only. Sin offerings were not the only types of offering. You could also offer a sacrifice to God to say thanks, or for other reasons to show gratitude. The Hebrew word for sin literally means to miss the mark. This is what the sacrificial system was intended for, but you didn't need a blood sacrifice. you could offer grain or flour. It really depended on how deep your pockets were. But you must be very careful not to make the same mistake as those who thought they could sin and offer a sacrifice and be forgiven. A sacrifice didn't automatically atone for sins. In fact, a sacrifice never atones for sins. You had to actually turn away from your sin to be forgiven. Many times God said to those very same people that He doesn't want their sacrifices. He'd rather they turn from their wicked ways and live. A sacrifice was only a gesture, and it was common among the people of the ancient world, not only the Israelites. It's similar to giving your loved ones a gift after you did something wrong, to show them that you're sorry and that you love them. There are multiple examples in the Hebrew Bible of God forgiving people without them giving a sacrifice. They were forgiven because they turned away from their sin and back to God. When you turn back to God, God turns back to you. One example is the people of Nineveh. Even though they were very wicked, God knew that they could turn around, as they are created in His very own image. Jonah didn't want to go there to warn them of destruction because he knew how loving, compassionate, and merciful our God is. God's ways are higher than our ways. We, like Jonah, a human, would rather see the wicked destroyed. We try to create God in our image. The reality is, God made us in His image, and we should never forget that.